What did your crush do that absolutely killed your interest? Attempted to get through a horror movie together, and he kept letting the movie run then rewinding the movie so that the horror never came. He pretended to be scared and would whine about the scare that was coming. I guess he thought this was a cute gesture and would refuse to continue. It dragged a 5-minute scene into a 45-minute production of his own. But I'm scared. No, I don't want to. This is terrifying. This was a guy who told me that he loved horror movies. He was full of really weird contradictions, but this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Edit. Holy cow, this really blew up. Thanks for confirming I'm not insane for being annoyed with his actions. Thanks for the comments, a lot of them were hilarious. There were a lot of questions, so I'll try to answer some of them. What was the movie? It was an older J-horror movie called Kutchasake Connor. I think the English title was something like The Carved Mouth Woman. You mentioned he fast forwarded. Do you mean rewound? Nope, I do mean fast forwarded. He would rewind, then fast forward to get to the beginning of the scene, and then pause it, and whine about how it was going to be scary. He would also study the paused scene, and look at clues, to determine what the scare was going to be. Did you comfort/hug him? It was maybe the second time we'd hung out together, so even though I was interested in him, it was too early to say we were dating, and I was pretty shy and kind of reserved, so no hugging would have happened, even if it all had gone well. What were you doing during the 45 minutes? I remember thinking, is he for real? Then thought that somehow maybe he was trying to tease me. He's a man of a lot of contradictions. So I played along for a while. By the time 15 minutes passed, I'm sure I was sighing audibly. I suggested that we stop and maybe watch something else. He refused. Close to the 30-minute mark I think I snapped and said words to the effect of, come on, it's probably not that bad. Let's just go through it and continue the movie, don't waste time. He laughed and kept up the one-man show of I'm a sensitive man and I'm not afraid to show it. I gave up and just started looking through my phone because this was such a waste of time, and finally I think he realized he'd gone too far and let the scene play out. Did you end up finishing the movie? Nope, because he tried the same thing at the next scary part and I made my excuses and got out of there. Was he a child? Nope, fully grown male of legal age. Why didn't you just stab him? I considered it, but I wasn't carrying my Dexter kill room equipment and the blood would have been too messy. Just kidding. He was tall, and I'm pretty short. Probably wouldn't have ended well for me. Did you let him know why you didn't want to see him again? Nope, I never told him that this was the defining moment in which I lost interest. He was also kind of controlling and had a number of really weird quirks that I won't bore my fellow redditors with. Basically we just didn't talk as much after that, and that was that. We went to Disneyland, where I had an annual pass, with my friends and family for an event called Dapper Day, where you dress up in dapper clothing so everything looks very old time. I had done it for years with my friends and he wanted to come, and my mom and siblings were going for the first time too. I was really excited as it was the first time he had ever met my family. Well, we went on one ride with my family and my friends, and then he said, do you want to go on a ride just me and you? I thought we'd come back and spend the rest of the day with them, but as soon as we were out of earshot he was complaining about my family and how weird it was that they were there, and he wanted to do Disney with just me. But he had known they were coming, so I was confused. Then we went on one more ride and he started complaining about how hot it was, how tired he was, and before lunch he wanted to go home. I was super upset, but didn't want him leaving on his own, so I just went with him. But on the way home I wished I had just let him leave, and I could have stayed with all the people I loved. It was the first time in years my sister and my mom had been to Disney and I didn't know it then, but it was the last time I got to go with my brothers, before they grew up, and now they hate me. He was just some dude I dated, not a boyfriend or anything that lasted very long. I'm still so mad at myself for letting him ruin my day. But yeah, it absolutely killed anything I felt for him, and we broke up a few days later. One point he brought his untrained dog on the date without asking. I love dogs. Trained dogs that don't lick my face and respect personal space. Such as my own dog and many of my friends' dogs. Point 2. He had a TV sound system subwoofer strapped to his backseat, broken and stuck on 11 or something. Wouldn't let me turn the music down. I'm convinced that one date actually caused hearing loss. Poor dog. 3. He blew smoke from his joint in my face when I told him I didn't smoke because I get anxious. 4. Ordered food delivery for himself and told me I couldn't have any cause leftovers were for his lunch tomorrow. 5. His car was painted with wall paint. 6. He yelled at me when his dog stressed me out by having explosive sheet on the rug and then running over to me and attacking my legs. I didn't want to be sheet on, so I said no and tried to step away from the dog. He asked me why I don't know how to deal with dogs. Then proceeded to smack his dog. 7. Drank from the moment we went into his house, even though he was meant to drive me home but also never offered me a drink. The cab was like $35. Course he lived in the faking rich area of town halfway up the mountain and I lived not there. Why do many examples? Same damn date. I also left my umbrella at his house and then he lied when I asked for it back. Edit. I went to high school with the guy and had a huge crush on him all through school. Right after high school we matched on Tinder and I was so excited. There was a gal I had a huge crush on all throughout high school, but was too timid to ask out. About 4 years after graduation she hit me up on Facebook and suggested hanging out and going to dinner. She had moved to another state and I happened to be in that state for a while for training. When we got to the restaurant she ordered 70, not a typo, wings, a pitcher of margarita, and a family-sized cheese fries. I was slightly stunned, but kept rolling with it to see what would happen. She then proceeded to loudly tell, in great detail, the story of when her and her gal pals had gone down across the border to Mexico to watch a donkey show. This ended in multiple complaints to the restaurant staff by the diners within earshot, approximately half the damned restaurant, and most simply got up and walked out. Eventually the food arrived, where she proceeded to eat all the skin off her 70 wings and throw the meat out, stopping briefly to grab a handful of cheese fries or drink some of her margarita pitcher. The pitcher, naturally, acting as a large glass for her, rather than her pouring it into glasses each time. I had since transitioned from silent amusement to silent horror, but, as one tends to do, thought that putting up with gluttonous buffoonery after a 200-mile drive would at least get me laid. 2 hours and a $200 bill later we end up at her place, where she had planned a party with all her friends. About 6 beers in she turns to me in panicked hysteria, letting me know she's far too drunk to complete her bartender's license exam online, but that it's due in a matter of hours or she will lose her job. You guessed it, she stayed out and partied and I sat through the videos and took the quizzes on her work account. Bam. Licensed bartender. Except not because it was her test. At least maybe now I'll end up getting laid. About the time I finished her exam she came back into the room, gave me a big ol' thank you kiss, and suggested she'd like to shower up before bed. She did exactly that. Took a shower, got out, and passed out in my lap. I left before she could wake up and never talked to her again. This happened last night. My usual bubbly self has been down lately with the state of the world and my own personal demons. My new man friend has not seen me sad until this week. He kept asking me what was wrong, and I opened up and expressed how every morning it feels like I'm drowning in the stupidity of our shared reality, and I'm scared for my future and being destitute. I started tearing up a little, because shit sucks. All the while I was holding his hand and being open, allowing myself to take in whatever comfort he was willing to share. After a brief moment of sweetness and comfort, he got up and left in a hurry. Avoided my kiss goodbye and pretty much said whatever when I told him goodnight and to drive safe. It felt very odd, like I upset him for being open after he asked me to be. Nothing I was upset about had anything to do with him or any relationship. This man is 37 years old. I'm 32. It made me feel manipulated somehow, like he wanted me to be upset about him or something. All I know is that I can't get wet for a grown man who acts like a child whenever real emotions and concerns are on the table. If I have to survive the apocalypse single, then so be it. Texted me twice since he left in a hurry. Both texts full of heart emojis and shit. Nothing explaining his abrupt departure or attitude change. Feeling real weird about it. It's sometime in the summer, Circa 1998 in Southern California. I had been friends with this girl for a couple of years. I was going into my senior year of high school and she was a junior. I had had a crush on her since we met in her freshman year. So we are hanging out and she's like, "My mom is gone. Want to go back to my house?" Yes. Yes. Just, God yes. I'm in, boys. So we go to her house and make our way to her bedroom. I can't believe this is happening. She sits down on the floor, okay, and starts opening drawers. Okay, at this point, I have zero clue what is going on. Then she pulls it out, a Ziploc bag full of what looks like ashes. I'm even more confused than before, which I didn't think was possible. "What is that?" I ask. "My grandfather," she replies. I didn't know what to say. This chick had her grandfather's ashes in a Ziploc bag in a drawer in her bedroom. I still, to this day, can't process it. Some of the unanswered questions I have: why are his ashes in a Ziploc bag instead of an urn? Why is that Ziploc bag in your room? How is your mother okay with her dead father's ashes being in a Ziploc bag in your room? That pretty much killed both the crush and the friendship. Traveled poorly, incredibly poorly. I found a killer deal on a trip to Paris, and she had never been overseas. We live in the US. I mentioned that I was going on this trip by myself, and she asked if she could come. I said of course. I figured if I couldn't seal the deal in the most romantic city on earth, then I never stood a chance. I speak a little French, and I told her to learn some really basic French before we go. Simple questions and food items. I didn't want to just serve as her translator for the whole trip. Long story short, she learned zero French, so I served as translator. I also learned that she was a very picky eater and wouldn't go into any restaurant until I translated the whole menu for her. If there wasn't a Caesar salad or chicken sandwich on the menu, she would ask to eat somewhere else. She also labeled every aspect of French culture as weird. Everything from the cuisine, to the way people interact, to the way they dressed. It was all met with the proclamation, "That's weird." By the second night I realized I no longer had any sort of romantic interest in this person. TLDR, had a thing for a girl for a long time, learned she was a terrible traveler when we went to Europe, and now I don't have a thing for her. I had a crush on this boy since I was 12 to 13. The crush faded a bit in high school as it was clear it wasn't going to happen. Then I was 22, much hotter, and recently broken up. We began flirting a bit over SM and text, and were dancing around having a date. Before this came to fruition, we ran into each other at the local pub one weekend. It was common at this time to see people from high school, because it was a small town and a lot of kids still lived at home and commuted to the university a few towns over. I was super drunk and on the rebound, and he was there giving me all the attention I had always wanted. But I was mega intoxicated. We started making out, but I was blacking out in the middle of it and felt like I was waking up as I opened my eyes to the dancer floor around us, shocked he was kissing me. Of course, I started to feel sick, and we went outside for fresh air and a bit more making out. We sat on a large planter and then suddenly, I had to puke. I bent backwards behind the plant and bathed into the soil, apologizing as I came up at how gross that was. He still tried to kiss me after and let him come home with me. Despite being super drunk, I was not into one night stands and really only had sex with boyfriends at this point. Plus my sister was home, lol. I told him no and my friend drove me home, slut shaming me once we were in my driveway. The next morning he started texting me, and after a bit of conversation he told me he had gone home with someone else. I was hurt and weirded out from him pressuring me the night before. My crush on him officially died. Souped off 4 different dudes in one night in the bathroom of a bar. This actually happened about 5 weeks ago. As bars starting opening back up in my area, I met my roommate out one of the first nights, a Wednesday. A girl that I know and is very attractive, that I had a bit of a thing for, was there. She is hammered. At one point we see her jump on a dude's back and walk back to the men's bathroom together. They are in there over 5 minutes. My roommate goes in after they come out and has a $20 bill he found on the counter. We joke about what seems like happened and that she must have forgot her payment. We tell the manager on duty about it and he informs us she had already sooked him off in the bathroom about an hour earlier. Shortly after this she sees me and tries to kiss me. I push her away on the excuse of social distancing. Maybe 30 minutes later she goes to the women's bathroom with another guy. I'm talking to a dude a few minutes after who comments on the troublemaker having disappeared. I inform him of what's going on. He decides to check. We see two people in the stall with the dude's pants around his ankles. Maybe an hour after this, I see her go back into the men's room alone, followed 15 seconds later by a dude trying far too hard to be casual. They are in there a few minutes. I accept that women I like will have been with other men, but 2 confirmed and 2 likely other dudes getting souped off in the same night in the bathroom of a bar is just too faking trashy. It was all the way back in the 4th grade on the last week of school. Our teacher and the teacher across the hall arranged for our classes to play kickball against each other at the end of the day. I was never an athletic kid, but I faking loved kickball. I volunteered to be on my class's team and was one of only 3 girls who chose to play and was the smallest and least athletic girl. Despite this, our team did well, and in the last few minutes of the game, I was again up to the plate. It just so happened the boy I had a crush on all year was right behind me to go next. I was determined to impress him. I kicked the ball as hard as I could and ran. I made it to third base and earned our team 2 more points, tying up the score with the other class. It was a legendary moment for me. I was pumped up and ready to go, ready to win it. When my crush at the time stepped up to the plate. He was a bit of a class clown, but had previously taken the game seriously. The pitcher threw the ball and my crush pretended to miss the ball, spinning around saying oopsie doopsie. I missed. Everyone thought it was funny, so he did it again and again. And even after he should have been out, they just kept letting him do the same dumb joke over and over. It only ended when the teachers called time and we had to go back inside. I would have won us the game, beaten the other class that had previously beaten us in every friendly competition that year. But my crush had to act like a fool and end it with a tie. I never spoke to him again, though he never noticed, because I was an awkward one and never really spoke to him in the first place. She was smart, funny, kind, outgoing, assertive, athletic, stunningly gorgeous. Literally got a pain in my chest when I saw her nearly every day, and we worked together and got along pretty well. One day I found out she didn't have a boyfriend. I forget how that conversation started, but that was the result. However, I was a supervisor in a different department, and she was an intern, and things could have gone very badly with that work culture, and hence my job. If I made a public overture, and any negativity arose out of it, not to mention possibly creating a hostile work environment for her, or appearing to give favoritism, even though she didn't report to me directly. I was always nice, but quite professional at work when we chatted, trying to never give away how smitten I was with her, because we were literally never alone, and had no reason to be while there. I was like 6 years older than her, graduated, and, slowly, pursuing a master's, but I absolutely didn't feel older then, nor do I now. I stay fit, and often act, and am frequently assumed to be younger than I'm all throughout my 20s and 30s, but I still had work responsibilities, titles, management expectations to meet. I was a young supervisor looking to impress. etc. Such as corporate life. So I sent her several gifts, not expensive. For instance, some carefully selected flowers or an online card with a link to a playlist I put together that I thought she might like to listen to, the late 2000s equivalent of a mixtape, only ever with an anonymous mail address I had created as a sender and a request that she just write back if she ever felt like talking with an admirer she'd known for a while. If she had accepted, and we got along, I'd have tried to make the relationship work public very slowly among management for both our benefits, and I thought it was possible. She never responded. After a couple of months of I think 5 or so overtures like that, the first for her birthday, then I think it was Valentine's Day soon after, etc., and knowing from talking with her at work that she was still not dating anyone, morning coffee bar talk is great for casual chatting. People are more open usually. I finally found out that she was concentrated on finishing school and planning to move away when she completed her degree and didn't want to make any new relationships before she left. I gently jokingly prodded about a bit as to whether she'd reconsider for the right guy, but no, she considered that too cruel to him and a mistake for herself to make. Damn it, she was even honorable. In my final anonymous message I straight out asked if these attempts to reach out to her were making her uncomfortable or if she just didn't want them anymore, and to simply reply with that, and that'd be the end of it. Never a single response, and I never wrote again. Points to save myself agony. I force myself to confront reality. She had said no by never saying a word. It took another several agonizing months that I still remember wrestling with myself over whether or not to just flat out tell her that it had been me, but I never did. I literally just repeated to myself, she doesn't want you, she isn't interested, like when I ran or hit the gym or whatever, like a mantra in my head. And then suddenly I was through it. The pain in my chest when I saw her every workday just disappeared. She finished her degree and left the next year or so, like she'd said. Now over 10 years later it's just a slightly embarrassing memory of my attempt at creating a relationship that got shut down before it ever started. It turns out ignoring attention you don't want to receive can work pretty well sometimes. It was after months of putting up with him constantly berating and talking shit about decent people to me, as well as making those sort of comments about me to my face. Constantly about how I wasn't skilled enough to do this or that, or on the flip side, how actually a few pieces of advice he gave me were what made me as good as I was, and said he felt he deserved more credit, except of course I was still not as good, and could never be as good as him. In addition to that, he constantly undermined and ignored my feelings, acting like whenever I was upset or expressed how I was feeling to him, he would roll his eyes and act bored and annoyed. I confronted him about these things multiple times, and he always apologized the exact same way, but never treated me better. Finally, after pulling some more shit that I called him out on, he sent me a long text that included him saying the reason he was mean and bitchy all the time was because I made him feel insecure, and that he felt like he could never be himself around me. I stopped talking to him after that, but one time a few months later he came across my sister on Discord and started ranting to her about how he didn't understand why I don't talk to him anymore. I was just like, okay, so you bully me because you don't feel comfortable being yourself around me? Like, I'm sorry, does being yourself have to include being a piece of shit? He's all around just a really sick person, but unfortunately we are still involved in the same things. You might be wondering why I didn't cave earlier. Honestly, I'm never good with not giving people the benefit of the doubt. I always want to see the good in people, and it's hard to accept that they'll just never stop treating you so badly, even if you calmly and considerately communicate that to them. In one of my classes in high school we had to do a presentation about a government program that needed more/less funding. Two of my friends did theirs on abortion, two different views, and I did mine on adoption, and with their permission I incorporated their presentations with mine. I had a very strong argument and presentation on why I thought adoption should have more funding and be made more affordable, and at the end of it, I asked if anyone had any questions. Now it should be noted that I was strongly looking into adoption because I had just gotten out of a really serious relationship with my ex-girlfriend. It was our only way to have children together, as I'm a girl. The former crush asked why would the government need to fund children who were never wanted in the first place. My friend that was against abortion spent time in an adoption center and shared stories for me to use in my presentation. She started to cry and ran out of the classroom. I simply replied, "You never know who's adopted. Even you could be adopted." My dad was adopted by my grandmother when his egg donor signed her rights away. For children who live in adoption centers don't always have the best lives. I'm going to cut my presentation off now. Me and my other friend took off out the door to find our friend.